Let's start, Senator Sununu, with you. I'm going to ask you the most cliched question ever done as part of State of the Union preview. What does the president have to do tonight?
Just show up. Look, from a standpoint of a member of Congress, they're all generally the same, with the exception of the post-crisis speeches. Katrina, financial crisis, 9/11 obviously coming to mind. But this is largely an exercise in the president laying out, as the cliche goes, the laundry list of programs. I think this is probably the most meaningless State of the Union since, say, 2007 or maybe back to 2000. And both of those were obviously late in the presidencies of Bill Clinton and George Bush. And you've seen the early programs that he's put out. From the standpoint of a member of Congress, those are just so unlikely to be taken up in the form that he's presenting them, that it just makes this an exercise in sort of broad communication, themes, whatever you want to say as a White House staffer, but it's not meaningful to Congress.
Anita?
John.
I believe you may have a slightly different point of view than your friend over there, your Republican friend to your right. Tell us what you think the president has to do tonight.
Well, I think that the president could come tonight, read the dictionary, and the congressional Republicans would vote no. So I don't actually think,
yes.
Well, and I don't actually think it matters too much in terms of Congress, because I think that the congressional Republicans have their own programs, which presumably they'll let the American people know about in due time. What the president needs to do tonight is to cap off an immensely successful 2 months where he has demonstrated strength, leadership, and started to lay out a very specific set of proposals to address what is the #1 issue for people in this country, which is the wage stagnation, the sense that they're not getting ahead. And I think that that's going to raise a very high bar for the Republican Party, for those who are running for the presidency and those who are in Congress, because he has begun to lay out proposals that is going to be difficult for them to embrace, but in many ways equally difficult for them to oppose.
Al, this is the best economy in which President Obama has ever given a State of the Union. His approval rating is up. Normally those two factors give a president a stronger hand, if not with the opposition party, with the public. How big a factor is that in sort of the impact the speech can have tonight?
Well, it's better than if it weren't the case, Mark, but I do agree with John. In this cycle, these speeches really don't matter. I went back and I read Clinton 99 and Bush 2007. You know what they both said? Clinton talked about we're going to have a government in Iraq that represents the kind of people that they are and we are. And Bush talked, and yes, and Bush talked about victory in Iraq. So that kind of shows you where we are in this cycle. However, I agree with what you said in the earlier segment. The rollout was important to do because these speeches are discounted to begin with. The TV audiences are down. Everyone knows what's going to happen. So what I think Obama did rather effectively was set the predicate for a debate. Very little will happen, some might, and he sets the predicate for the next presidential election.
Anita, let me ask you this question, just because you have been in that White House when a State of the Union was being constructed. One of the things Mark said that's different now is the economy is better, but the other is that this rollout has been so different from any other State of the Union ever. If you were in the White House now, what would be your indices for success tonight? Because you're not going to have news breaking. It's not going to be the things that you would normally, well, how did this new idea go over? Everybody knows what he's going to say. So what would you be looking for tonight to judge whether this was a good speech or a bad speech?
I think the kinds of metrics that everybody has to look at now when they're communicating, any kind of politician, elected official, are ones around engagement. And what kind of engagement do you get? What kind of penetration into social media networks do you get, knowing that an increasing number of people in this country are getting their news from their social networks? So I think that the kinds of metrics are different from in the past. But at the end of the day, I agree with Al. Did you set an agenda? I'm going to go with the bold prediction that I actually don't think much of this speech will deal with Iraq, but unlike those previous ones. But did you set out an agenda? Did you set the terms of engagement and the debate? And I think that that is ultimately how the White House will judge the success.
Joining us now from the aforementioned White House, Anita Dunn's successor, Jennifer Palmieri, the White House Communications Director. Karen Hughes had that job, too, as did Mark Gearan. Who's your favorite all-time White House Communications Director?
Anita Dunn.
Yeah, I thought you'd say that. So we've been praising your rollout and the smart move of previewing stuff early. I won't consider this a total softball, but how much have you all executed your vision of how effective that would be?
I mean, well, you know, the ultimate test is the reaction to the speech tonight. And what we were trying to do is to make the speech tonight a more meaningful experience for the public by putting a lot of the policies out in advance so there's some context for them, right? They have some idea, like tangible ideas of what these policies would mean. And then also, Anita mentioned that we're trying to, and doing this through our website tonight, trying to reach a lot of audiences that care a lot about particular issues that the president's going to talk about, and you know we will have we're going to have content for those audiences that's probably more detailed than the president will do in his speech, but so that we can reach as many people who care about these issues. So it's gone well so far, but you know the ultimate test is, and I think Anita's right, is we want the American people to come away from this hearing the president laid out his theory about middle-class economics. It's the contrast to trickle-down economics, and that he has specific ideas about what would actually close the gap for the middle class, so that their wages are increasing, there's better high-paying jobs, and so our goal and part of the theory of doing a lot of the policy ahead of time was so that when the president does give this speech, he can not just, you know, because right now, you know, you could have 50 pieces of policy in one State of the Union, and he's not just blowing by these issues, but able to talk about like the values behind them, what it means for real life, why it's meaningful. So we're optimistic. See.
Jen, let me ask you, there's obviously the things the president's putting forward as matters of policy are things he believes in, things that he would love for Republicans to meet him halfway on in terms of negotiating. A lot of people don't think that's very likely. So another objective, obviously, is to try to kind of set the context and the table for 2016. How much is that on the president's mind explicitly, putting Republicans in a difficult position if they have to oppose these policies that are very popular, many of them, in order to create a context for whoever the Democratic nominee is in the next presidential election?
I think what's more on his mind, or what is on his mind, is how, you know, we've had, this is the first serious interaction with this new Congress, right? We've had some discussions behind the scenes about moving business tax reform. That's something the president has said that they want to do. We want to do that in a way that helps the middle class. We've talked about doing infrastructure, but we need to go bigger and broader than that. So what he's hoping is that this is our first big opening conversation with the Republican Congress, but we're broadening the discussion. So we're not just talking narrowly about taxes, but that we're looking at how this all impacts the middle class. And, you know, everybody wants to do that, right? Everyone wants to grow the middle class. So, you know, we're focused on how it can impact things in 2015.
Jennifer, I know she just told us what was more on the president's mind, but you're not going to tell me that 2016 isn't on his mind at all, right?
I really don't think it is on his mind. I think that, you know, he has 2 years left. He feels 2 years is a long time, but he also feels an urgency to get like these very good, strong ideas out there and to try to make as much progress as we can these 2 years.
Boston Globe columnist John Sununu, do you have a question for Jennifer Palmieri?
Does anyone at the White House really think, or let me rephrase it, what's the process for getting Congress to take up something like a $320 billion tax increase? I mean, I understand where those ideas are coming from. Some of them the president has talked about before. But if this is a conversation with Congress, I don't see why and how the expectation comes through whereby Congress suddenly picks up this tax bill. It just doesn't seem realistic. So what's the process? Describe.
I guess we think that the process first is that he's having a conversation with the American public, right? So we think his job in the State of the Union is to say, here's the State of the Union, here's how we've done, here's how we're doing. These are the steps that we need to take on our biggest challenges. He's going to identify the biggest challenge is closing the gap with the middle class. And, you know, his answer to what we need to do that is his answer. So this is saying these are the steps I believe we need to take, and then we'll start the conversation within Congress. But this is, you know, his job is to tell the American people very clearly what are the steps he thinks that we need to take in order to close this gap. So we'll start that, and then we'll start the conversation with Congress. But that's our theory is not, we're not going to trim our sails on what we think the solutions are at the outset.